couple of weeks ago, Steve Bannon joined me on the Timcast IRL podcast. He said, come August 15th, all hell will break loose once mothers find out what these schools are doing to their children. Not just what they're teaching, like critical race applied principles, but also the masks, the separation, the weird social anxiety. Steve Bannon was correct. Now, to the extent at which all hell does break loose, I honestly don't know. But we are starting to see some raucous behavior. We have this story from the Daily Mail. We know who you are. We will find you. Furious anti-maskers threaten Tennessee school board official over decision to reinstate face masks as COVID cases surge. Now, if you want to check out that interview with Bannon, go to timcast.com, become a member. And you can actually just use the search bar at the top and you can see the members only segment. Or, of course, the conversation about the schools was on YouTube at youtube.com/timcastirl. The website conversation we had, the members only, was more about election stuff, which I'm not convinced he will be correct about. But hey, by all means, do the investigations, whatever. That's neither here nor there in this segment. I want to talk to you about what we're seeing with schools, because it's not just that parents are getting outraged, showing up. It's that more and more restrictions are coming. From timcast.com. California, the first state to mandate vaccines or weekly tests for teachers. Look at this photo. Look at these kids wearing masks and in these weird plexiglass little shields. This is a whole new level of creepy. And I guess it's kind of scary. I guess the question ultimately comes down to is COVID as bad as they like bad enough to warrant everything they're doing? So I'll tell you this, it's worse than the flu. The mortality rate is substantially higher, but it's not like airborne Ebola or anything like that. We're not talking about like zombies. And a lot of people are saying that we're entering this period where we have to recognize COVID is going to be here. And you're going to have to get, every year they'll have the new COVID shot like the flu shot, and people who choose to get it will get it. The craziest thing, I suppose, is what was the line at which we decided we would completely overhaul how we handle yearly illnesses or severe novel illnesses? Again, like I said, we all know if you look at the data that COVID is worse than the flu. It is not the flu. Some people like to say it's a bad flu. And I'm like, let's just separate these ideas for a second. The mortality rate is higher for COVID. But where was that line? That's what I'm legit asking. Because with the flu, we say, people get the flu and they die. A lot of people, a lot of times. And you can go to your Walgreens or Duane Reade or whatever. I don't know if Duane Reade does this, but they have the flu shot. And you walk in, you sit down, and they'll say, this flu shot, is for these particular strains, and it should reduce the symptoms and all that stuff. But it was a choice. We didn't lock the stores down. And I get it. I get it. COVID is worse. So my question is, from the flu to COVID, where is the line where we were like, okay, now we're going to shut down all our businesses. We're going to mandate masks at schools. We're going to tell everyone they have to get vaccinated. Where was that line? And I'm asking that legitimately. It's not rhetorical. Like, where do you think that threshold is? And I think that's one of the questions that if we ask, we might get to better understand each other. Because for a lot of people, they probably view the flu as warranting all this stuff. If they were told, like, oh no, it's dangerous, so people are dying. That what a lot of people in the mainstream establishment were saying is, if it saves one life, well, a lot of things could save one life. Banning cars could save a life, I guess. Although then I suppose you'd get a lot of death from like the collapse of the economy. But well, that's kind of the point. When they locked everything down and put in all these restrictions, they don't consider the after effects because it could save one life. But how many lives are you destroying and harming by the economic collapse? More importantly, what's going to happen to these kids? My friends, we're seeing the authoritarian creep. So we'll jump into this story, but I wanted to highlight something first. Something I think represents what we're saying. Let's see which tweet. Here it is. Jeff Jarvis is a journalism professor. I believe he's at CUNY. I don't know if he's still there now. I know Jeff. I've talked to him. Buzz Machine professor at CUNY, Craig Newmark Jay's school. He said, well, let me pull up his Twitter thread and explain to you, and then we'll talk about what's going to happen with the parents. He said, oh, the irony of turning on Morning Joe to be scolded for scolding. I'm told I should not be angry at the unvaccinated. Well, I am. I am angry at the 50% of staff at my father's retirement home who chose not to be vaccinated. As a result, my 95-year-old fully vaccinated father got a breakthrough COVID case, spent 11 days hospitalized when we could not see or talk with him. He's deaf. And now will spend a few weeks in rehab because of the choice made by the unvaccinated there. You see, this is really interesting. This is the authoritarian expansion in this country from people like Jeff. It used to be that we accepted we were responsible for what happens in our lives to a great degree. If a meteor falls and lands on your house, okay, I guess I can't blame you because no one knew that was going to happen. And how do you predict a meteor slamming into a building? You don't. If you move to Tornado Alley and a tornado happens and it damages your house, yes, to a certain extent, you are responsible. I'm not going to blame you for an act of nature, and I will work to help you, but you could always choose not to live there. Not everybody can, though. Not everybody has that mobility. It's difficult. As for Jeff's statement on his father, either he did not check or he did not care that the people at the nursing home were 50% unvaccinated. Why is it the fault of the nursing home when individuals can choose what medication they get based on their doctor's advice? And that's what I always recommend you talk to a doctor. Why is it their fault, not your fault? If you truly cared about your father, and I believe he does, why? And it seems he knew the staff was not vaccinated. If he found out after the fact when his father got sick and he said, how did my dad get sick? And they said, well, half the staff is unvaccinated. Perhaps he should have checked to make sure, because we've been in this pandemic now for like a year and a half. Certainly with everything we've heard about New York and nursing homes, if you were truly paying attention and responsible, you'd call up your nursing home and say, what's going on? Are your staff vaccinated? And when they said no, be like, I'm taking my father out of here because I'm concerned about his health. Now, I empathize. I sympathize. I don't want Jeff's dad to be ill. I just don't think it's fair for him to blame everyone else when either it was unforeseen or he could have done a better job. This is the authoritarian creed in which he says you must do something so that I don't have to worry about it. That's not how the world works. I mean, I suppose with that mentality, we could just, I don't know, round up all the bears in the forest and lock them in a cage so that we don't have to worry about bear attacks. Or we can go and round up all the mountain lions so we don't got to worry about mountain lion attacks. That's absurd. When you go hiking, you recognize there's bears and there's mountain lions. And then there's smaller critters too. You don't want to get bit by a bat or something. That's why you wear protection. It's why you wear gloves or long sleeve. You know, there's ticks out there. Could you imagine like someone walking into the woods getting a bunch of ticks and then suing the state, being like, they should be doing something about this? Like, yo, the world exists. These things happen. You know the possibilities. You must take the actions to be responsible for yourselves. But these people are authoritarian. Jeff is upset. He's saying everyone must adhere to a strict authority structure so that I don't have to worry about it. And I say, I disagree. I think that's one of the big differences between libertarian and authoritarian. A libertarian says, I'll be responsible for myself. The authoritarian says, you must do what I say because I don't want to be responsible for what happens after the fact. Well, let's read this story and see how parents are handling this. And we'll ask ourselves this question. Is Steve Bannon correct in the long run? I think he's correct for now. We'll see if parents actually resist to by any substantial means. Because I'll tell you this. These videos, this video of this guy, they're yelling and they're screaming and they're like, you know, the cops come out. It's intense. But I'll tell you. What happens when the school says, okay, you win, we'll get rid of all these restrictions once your kids are vaccinated? How many parents are going to be like, oh, okay, that's fine. Well, there you go. So it seems like this might be the big ask technique. They make life miserable. They say, this is what we have to do. And then they say, well, you know what? We could remove all of these things if everyone's vaccinated. The Daily Mail reports astonishing video footage showed from the moment Tennessee anti-maskers screamed abuse and threats at officials after a school board reinstated mandatory face mask rules. One enraged-looking man was filmed following an unidentified man who had spoken at the Williamson County School Board meeting Tuesday night and roaring, "We know who you are. You can live freely, but we will find you." Another man stood beside him, was filmed telling his pal to calm down before himself saying, "You will never be allowed in public again," to the official as he got into his car with the help of a sheriff's deputy who was escorting him. The huge mob was filmed confronting the man and other officials after the meeting concluded Tuesday amid a surge of new COVID cases in Tennessee. It saw the board vote 7-3 to reinstate mask mandates for elementary school students because COVID vaccines have not yet been made available to the young. So you see what they're doing? Now, here's my question. Who are these board members? How is it that they are so at odds with the actual community? Who are these people and how do they have any of this authority? Something isn't right. There was one video from a while ago where a bunch of people went to a board meeting and then held a vote and said, those people are out, we are in. And then the city was like, no, that doesn't count. It wasn't official, so we're not going to recognize that. Who are these people? When did this country become authoritarian despotism? Who are these board members? They do not have the authority to just do these things if the people come out and say no. But we'll see, I suppose. Will people start getting mad? I mean, people are getting mad, but I mean, like, will more people wake up to this? Another protester was filmed shouting, "There's a bad place in hell for you guys," while the scores of anti-maskers joined together in a chant of "will not comply." The Williamson County Schools Board of Education had healthcare professionals at their meeting to announce the new policy and answer questions. But it was disrupted by a group of agitated protesters who followed them into the parking lot before harassing them and surrounding their cars. One woman approached a masked individual and shouted, "Take that mask off," as the group chanted "no more masks." Now, this to me is very weird. I don't care what you do. I understand the anger over forcing kids to do things if the parents think they shouldn't. That's politics. Hey, you shouldn't have this policy. We reject it. It's another thing to walk up to a random person wearing a mask and be like, "Take it off." Why? Who cares? Let him wear. I don't care. A guy could walk around in a banana suit for all I care. Could you imagine, like, if I see a guy walking around with 12 masks, I'd just chuckle to myself. And I'd be like, "Hey, whatever, man, you do your thing." I've seen double maskers, and I'm just like, I don't care, whatever. Not only that, but the Frontline Coalition of Doctors, the people who are advocates of alternative treatments, also recommend wearing masks when it comes to COVID anyway. I think if people are sick, you wear a mask. There you go. If you got a cold, you don't want to cough on people because of the droplets, if you get that reference. Another man yelled, "You are child abusers, and there's a place for you guys. There's a bad place in hell for you guys, and everyone's taking notes." This is getting crazy. Bannon told me on Timcast IRL that, it wasn't until the women came out in France that the revolution actually happened. It was when society got to the point where the women in their homes were being impacted and were fed up and came out, and that's when it was like the tides had turned. Will it be the mothers seeing their children dejected and depressed, agitated, freaking out? Will they finally come out and scream, "Not to my kid"? I honestly don't think so. I really don't. I think what'll happen is once they say, okay, vaccines for kids, all these parents are going to be like, good. Not only that, I think to a great degree, many of these parents have already lost the long-term battle. I think there's a lot of parents who don't care about their kids at all. If you are sending your children to institutionalized learning facilities and you don't know what the teachers are teaching them, I don't think you care about your kids. I don't. I've heard from parents, they say, like, what am I going to teach my kid? I don't know. You teach your kids what you do know. That's just how it goes. Or you hire a tutor or do pods. I think school choice is very, very important. And I think those advocating for school choice care about their kids a whole lot. But there are too many people who are just like, go to school, whatever. See, I remember I remember going to public school. I remember how awful it was. I remember the overwhelming majority of teachers were nasty, snide. They were condescending. And I had like two good teachers that actually treated me like an adult and with respect and like someone who was trying to learn or needed to. But school's, in my opinion, trash. And that's why I stopped going when I was 14. And then, I went the autodidact route. And I just started reading things and exploring the world on my own. And I was homeschooled a little bit. I never finished high school or anything like that. And I think it's because these institutions are completely broken. As you can see with these school boards defying what the parents are telling them. They don't care what the parents think. So think about this. When you have a child and you're saying, I want my kid to learn, math. And the kid goes to school and learns critical race applied principles. Well, the school doesn't care about you. They don't care what you think. And if you're not actively paying attention to what they're doing and you just send your schools off just believing it's going to be fine, I don't think you care about your kids. I genuinely believe that. But maybe there's a better way to put it. Of course, people care about their kids, but not enough to look into what their kids are being taught, who they're hanging out with, and things like that. And that is troubling to me because that's how these lunatics actually keep gaining power. There are many millennials who are completely insane. They believe insane cult dogma. They lie and they cheat and they make things up. And I have seen these zealots. They are insane. I was at Mike Cernovich was speaking at and where was this? NYU, I think. And I was outside at a protest. And this young woman who someone pointed me out and said I was all these bad things. So this young woman went to the security and just started lying about literally anything she could say. And I was thinking to myself, like, why would she just make these things up? Why is this young person, who is probably a millennial, a younger millennial, why would she just want to make things up to cause harm and hurt? Because it's all about adhering to the tribe, to the system, to the institutions, to the authority. So when you put your kids in these schools and they're not taught to think, they're reprimanded for thinking, to be completely honest, and they are. It's reality. Now, probably proponents of schools and teachers would say that's not true. They'll say, but school is so important. Telling a kid to shut up and sit down and stop thinking and stop being an individual and all that stuff, nah, that's not working. There are good schools. That's why school choice is so important. But here we can see what's happening is parents are finally, the line may be crossed. Maybe the kids are getting depressed. We've had a lot of kids commit suicide over the past year. It's horrifying. Actually, some guy that I know, he did his whole thing about how his kid took his own life during the pandemic. That is terrifying. And it's time parents wake up to this stuff. Now, Rand Paul came out and he said he was going to advocate for school choice because of the schools and their mandates. Yes. So from the, the darkness, there may be a light we can see from all of this bad. Maybe the end result will be parents saying, I want to move my kid out of this school and go somewhere else. I want my tax dollars to go to what I think works. This stuff is completely broken. That's the authoritarian creep. Your kids are going to be indoctrinated by these wingnuts, these wackos. They're going to be told to shut up and fall in line or else, and many of them will do it. There's this guy, he did a video, it was funny. He went on the London Underground, and he held up a sign saying vaccine only, and he wore a yellow vest, and he told everybody, this is for vaccinated people only, and people complied. Some people didn't, but only a couple people didn't. One woman was like, this can't be legitimate. You're not real. And then he was like, are you vaccinated? And she was like, that's none of your business. And she was filming him. But most people were just like, okay, yeah, okay. And I think the governments of the world know this. They know that most people will just say, I don't care, whatever. They don't care what the end result will be. Now, I'm sure there's some utopian vision the authorities, the authoritarians and the authorities believe in. But man, it never really works out the way they think, does it? They always talk about this great utopian vision for society, and it always involves, crushing the rights of the individual because you think you're smarter. There's that quote. I can't remember who it was by, but it was really smart. He said something to the effect of, if these elites believe that the rabble are so dumb they need elites to guide them, then what about them puts them above other humans? Because certainly they're as fallible as any other person. I think that's a good point. These people in these meetings who are enforcing the rules that the parents clearly hate, they think they're smarter and better. Now, I'll tell you this. There are smarter people and there are dumber people, and that's a reality. But no one person is smart enough to maintain all of this system and manage it all. It's just not possible. That's why command economies like the Soviet Union do not work. That's why I think ultimately this will end up falling apart, because authoritarians tend to lose. Now, sometimes they get into power and it can last quite some time. I think the Soviet Union was 69 years, 70 years. And in the U.S., we've persisted much longer, a little over a couple hundred years now, because of freedom, because of more libertarian ideals, because we're a nation with classically liberal ideas. I'll put it this way. Many of these countries that fall apart in the communist regimes and things like that, they don't survive because they're rigid and authoritarian. You must adhere to the authority no matter what. And then eventually too much dissent bubbles up and the system collapses. In a country like ours, you have people constantly flicking off the government and fighting with each other, figuratively. What worries me is that the authoritarianism, it's getting so rigid with things like this will lead to the total collapse. Why did the Soviet Union fall? For a lot of reasons, for sure, but ultimately I think because command economies don't work. Hard authoritarianism breeds stagnation, and then eventually people are upset and they lose confidence in the system and it falters. In the United States, individualism and decentralization breeds competition and results in a more robust system. But over the past several years, and especially into now, the U.S. government and our cities and states have become more and more authoritarian, locking things down, resulting in things like this. Angry parents coming out, protesting out in front of schools. I don't want to say they threatened anybody, but getting awfully close to threatening people. And that's where you can see when parents say, we don't want mandates. If you want your kid to wear a mask, you can have your kid wear a mask. If we don't, it shouldn't be in the schools. You see the individualism versus the authoritarianism. And what happens is the authority tries to make everything rigid. The problem? Too much dissent emerges, and if there's no pressure release valve, it bursts. Which is why a republic, our system, is very important. The left is outraged because we have minority rural rule, which is a good thing. That's why I've warned about this. If the electoral college were to go away, this country would fall apart in 2 seconds. Because I assure you, states like, Texas, which is large and populous, which is, it's basically a purple state right now, but they're not going to just allow the federal government of Democrats to impose insane rules on their state. More importantly, Idaho and Montana and Wyoming. You think they're going to be like, we have zero representation in government, so we'll just keep doing what California wants. No way. You see, what happens is if California keeps setting the standard for what the U.S. does, then eventually a red state says, we don't have cities like California. We don't have terrain like California. We don't have the same problems with animals. We have bigger animals. We need firearms, things like that. But California keeps setting the standard for the entire country. And then eventually the state says, we're out. We're no longer going to comply because your laws are making it impossible for us to live. If you live in New York City, okay, certain rules make sense. If you live in Wyoming, those same rules don't make sense. That's why we need a republic system where Wyoming actually gets some representation in the federal government, albeit not that much. Montana and these other small or less populous states. What's happening now is the Democratic Party becomes more authoritarian and it enforces more edict across the country. You will start to see that fracturing, and we are. When Ron DeSantis tells Joe Biden to I don't want to hear a blip out of you about COVID. Joe Biden and the federal government come out and say, here's what everyone's got to do on COVID. And Texas and Florida are like, nah. And South Dakota, obviously. There's many states. It just goes to show you that the authoritarian attempt is actually stripping away confidence from the government. If the federal government says, here's our recommendations, we're willing to work with anybody to make it work for them. And then Florida said, we're going to do what we want to do. If Biden was like, I get it. You're Florida. You have the right to enact things. Let us know how we can help. Imagine what would have happened. Then you get a surge in cases and they'd say, look, we can't lock down our citizens because of these laws, but we could use assistance. And they'd be like, you got it. But right now what's happening is the left is saying, no, we're not going to help you because it's your fault. You should have done everything we want. All right, well, then I look at when the hurricanes come and wipe out the Gulf states. It's like, well, maybe it's your fault for being in a Gulf state. Why should we help you? The government should mandate hard relocations away from. No, of course not. That's insane. But that's where we're going. So right now I can say this. Bannon's statement to me, that parents would, lose it. Mothers would go nuts. All hell would break loose when they saw what the schools were doing to their kids. Okay. Kind of vague statement in the sense that to what extent will all hell break loose? We're seeing protests outside of schools and it's only August 12th. So maybe, will it escalate to the point where these schools start collapsing in the sense that students are being pulled out like crazy? Maybe. And I think it's a good thing. Parents, if you're listening, put your kids in a pod, form a pod with your neighbors. And the pod is basically like you hire a tutor and then all the kids hang out in the classroom together with a private tutor. They get to socially interact. It's not the same as homeschooling. It's just you creating your own local private teaching system. And I think on the days off, the parents who have a day off, they should dedicate a couple hours to doing career education for these kids. Imagine this. You got 7 parents, and between them, there's 14, 15 kids. You hire a tutor for all the basic stuff, math, literature, reading comprehension. But then whenever someone in the family, like whenever a parent has a day off, that dad can come in and be like, so I'm a carpenter. Let me show you what I do. And then the kids can learn carpentry and stuff, a little bit, rudimentary stuff. And then you got someone who's like, I'm a coach, I'm an athlete. How cool would that be? That to me would have been the ideal learning situation for me growing up, not these institutionalized learning facilities, which may not be long for this world in the sense that they exist today. So there may be dramatic changes coming. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.